Margaret Eleanor Whitmore had always prided herself on being sharp as a tack. At 78 she could still beat her bridge club at cards, recall every birthday in the family without checking her calendar, and manage her own investments with the precision of a Wall Street broker. So when she picked up the extension phone in her bedroom to make a call and heard her son Brad's voice already on the line, she almost hung up, until she heard her own name. "Mom's losing it, Diane. I'm telling you, it's getting worse." Margaret froze, her hand still on the receiver. "Did you see how she forgot Jennifer's recital last month?" That was Diane, her daughter-in-law, with that pinched tone she reserved for PTA meetings and complaint letters. "And she asked me the same question 3 times at Thanksgiving." "That's what I'm saying," Brad continued. "Dr. Patterson said he could write up the paperwork. Make it official. Diminished capacity, unable to manage her own affairs. The whole 9 yards." Margaret's heart began to pound, but she kept absolutely still, barely breathing. "How long would it take?" Diane asked. "Because I've been looking at that place in Connecticut. Shady Pines. It's not cheap, but it's discreet. They have memory care units. Patterson said he could have the evaluation done by next week. She trusts him, been her doctor for 20 years. She won't suspect a thing." There was a pause. Margaret could hear ice clinking in a glass through the phone. Probably Brad's nightly scotch. She'd been buying him Macallan 18 every Christmas, and this was how he repaid her. "What about Susan?" Diane asked. "Will she go along with it?" Brad snorted. "Susan's in San Francisco playing activist. She hasn't visited in 2 years. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her if it means she doesn't have to deal with Mom's care. Besides, she's always been the free spirit. Let the responsible ones handle the money." "The estate's worth how much now?" "Conservatively, $4.2 million. The house alone is worth 1.8 in this market. Then there's the stock portfolio, the bonds, the rental properties in Vermont." Margaret felt her face flush hot then cold. 47 years of marriage to Richard Whitmore, building a life together, raising these ungrateful children, and this was her reward. To be declared incompetent and warehoused like an unwanted piece of furniture while her own son liquidated her life's work. "When were you thinking of telling her?" Diane's voice had taken on a careful, measured quality. "Why tell her? That's the beauty of Patterson's approach. We have her evaluated, get the conservatorship, and present it as what's best for her safety. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be a done deal. She'll be settled in Shady Pines, we'll have power of attorney, and we can finally sell that money pit of a house." Margaret's hand tightened on the phone until her knuckles went white. "She did seem confused at the grocery store last week," Diane mused. "I saw her there and she was standing in the cereal aisle just staring. For like 5 minutes. Liar." Margaret had been at the symphony last Tuesday afternoon. She had the program in her purse. "See? It's the right thing to do. We're helping her really. And it's not like she needs all that money at her age. What's she going to do, take up skydiving?" They both laughed. The sound made Margaret's stomach turn. "All right," Diane said. "Do what you need to do. Just make sure the paperwork is airtight. I don't want Susan swooping in later with some lawyer." "Trust me," Brad said. "Patterson knows what he's doing. Mom will be in Shady Pines by the end of the month, and we can finally move forward with our lives." Margaret carefully, silently replaced the receiver. Her hand was shaking, not from age but from pure, crystallized rage. She walked to her bedroom window and looked out over the garden Richard had planted 30 years ago. The roses were dormant now, bare canes waiting for spring. She'd maintained this garden alone for the 12 years since Richard died. Pruned it, fed it, talked to it like he used to do. "Well, Richard," she whispered to the winter bare branches, "looks like our boy turned out to be exactly what you worried he'd become." Richard had wanted to leave the estate in a trust with strict conditions. But Margaret had convinced him to keep things simple. "They're our children," she'd said. "We can trust them." She'd been so spectacularly wrong. Margaret walked to her study, the room Richard had used for his law practice before retirement, and sat down at the mahogany desk. Her mind was racing, but not with confusion. With perfect, crystalline clarity. Dr. Patterson. That snake. 20 years of Christmas cards, of dinner invitations, of generous tips when he made house calls. She made a mental note of that betrayal. Brad and Diane. The golden couple. The successful ones. The responsible ones. About to inherit $4 million over her supposedly failing corpse. Anne Susan in San Francisco, too busy saving the world to save her own mother, apparently willing to sign away her mother's autonomy for convenience. Margaret pulled out her laptop, the one Brad assumed she couldn't operate properly, and opened her banking software. She reviewed every account, every investment, every asset. The house, the stocks, the bonds, the rental properties, the savings accounts, the CDs, the money market funds. $4.2 million, Brad had said. He was slightly off. It was $4.7 million, but who was counting? Her eyes fell on the framed photograph on the desk. Her and Richard at the animal shelter's fundraiser 15 years ago. They'd been major donors for years. Richard had loved animals, especially cats. They'd had 3 of their own over the years. Whiskers, Marmalade, and Princess Fluffington, as Richard had insisted on calling the last one. "You always said I should trust my instincts," Margaret said to Richard's photograph. "Well, darling, my instincts are telling me that our children are assholes." She laughed, a sharp, sudden bark of laughter that surprised her with its bitterness. Then Margaret Eleanor Whitmore opened a new browser window and typed, "Estate lawyers near me. Part 2 The plan." Charles Kensington III had seen a lot in his 40 years as an estate attorney in Greenwich, Connecticut. Bitter divorces, feuding siblings, hidden love children emerging from the woodwork with DNA tests. But he'd never seen anyone quite like the woman sitting across from his desk at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning. Margaret Whitmore sat ramrod straight in the leather chair, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a Chanel suit that was probably older than his paralegal but maintained with meticulous care. Her blue eyes were sharp and focused as she laid out her situation with the precision of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "Let me make sure I understand," Charles said, leaning back in his chair. "Your son and daughter-in-law are planning to have you declared incompetent, place you in a nursing home against your will, and seize control of your assets via conservatorship. And you want to liquidate your entire estate before they can do so." "Not liquidate, Mr. Kensington. Donate. Every penny. Every property. Every stock certificate." She smiled, and Charles felt a small chill run down his spine. It was not a warm smile. "I want to give it all away. Mrs. Whitmore, I have to ask, and please don't take this the wrong way, but are you sure you're thinking clearly about this? That's a significant estate you're talking about disposing of. Perhaps if you spoke with your son." "Mr. Kensington." Her voice could have cut glass. "I overheard my son plotting to have his own doctor declare me mentally unfit so he could steal my money. I am thinking more clearly than I have in years. The question is, can you help me or not?" Charles studied her for a long moment. Her gaze never wavered. "Who did you want to leave the estate to?" "The Greenwich Feline Rescue Society." Charles blinked. "The cat shelter?" "Every single penny." Margaret's smile widened. "My late husband Richard and I were major donors for years. They do excellent work. They rescue cats from high-kill shelters, provide medical care, find them homes. They operate on a shoestring budget. I imagine $4.7 million would be quite transformative for their mission." "Mrs. Whitmore, your children could contest this. They could claim undue influence, diminished capacity. Which is why I'm here, Mr. Kensington. I need this to be absolutely airtight. I want a full mental competency evaluation from an independent psychiatrist. Not Dr. Patterson, obviously. I want everything documented, witnessed, notarized, bulletproof. I want my children to have absolutely no legal recourse when I'm done." Charles found himself grinning despite his professional demeanor. "You want to salt the earth." "I want to burn it to the ground and salt the earth," Margaret corrected. "Can you help me?" "Mrs. Whitmore," Charles said, pulling out a legal pad, "it would be my absolute pleasure." Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret moved with the strategic precision of a 4-star general. Dr. Elizabeth Chin, a renowned neuropsychologist from Yale, conducted a full battery of cognitive tests. Margaret scored in the 97th percentile for her age group. Dr. Chen's report noted exceptional mental acuity, superior memory function, and excellent executive reasoning skills. Margaret met with Charles Kensington 4 times, reviewing every detail of the new will, the trust structure for the donation, and the timing of the announcement. Everything was witnessed by 3 independent parties, notarized and filed with the appropriate courts. She met with David Summers, the director of the Greenwich Feline Rescue Society, at a small cafe in town. Poor David nearly choked on his coffee when she told him her plans. Mrs. Whitmore, are you sure? He was a thin man in his 50s wearing a sweater with cat hair on it. His eyes were kind but overwhelmed. Completely sure, David. My husband loved your organization. We fostered 6 cats through your program over the years. This is what Richard would have wanted. But your family is exactly why I'm doing this, Margaret said firmly. The donation will be unrestricted funds with one request, that you name the new facility after my husband. The Richard Whitmore Feline Care Center. He'd like that. David's eyes filled with tears. We've been trying to expand for 5 years. With this, we could build a state-of-the-art facility, save thousands more cats, hire proper staff. I don't know what to say. Say you'll make him proud. Margaret also made one other call, to Susan in San Francisco. It was time to see where her daughter really stood. Mom, is everything okay? Susan sounded worried, which was something. I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me. Of course. What's wrong? If Brad asked you to sign papers declaring me mentally incompetent, would you do it? There was a long silence on the line. Mom, where is this coming from? Answer the question, Susan. Another pause. Then, has Brad been talking to you about this? So you knew. Mom, he called me last week. I told him he was out of his mind. I told him that if he tried anything like that, I'd fight him with every lawyer I could find. Susan's voice was fierce now. Is he seriously trying to do this? Margaret felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. He's already set it in motion. Dr. Patterson is preparing the evaluation as we speak. That son of a bitch. Susan sounded like she was pacing. Mom, I'm coming home. Today. I'll get on the next flight. We'll fight this together. Actually, darling, I have a better idea. How do you feel about attending a family dinner next Sunday? Everyone will be there. Brad, Diane, their kids. It'll be quite the occasion. Mom, what are you planning? Let's call it a family announcement. Margaret smiled at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Wear something nice, dear. And bring a camera. I have a feeling you'll want to remember this. Part 3: The dinner. The Sunday dinner was Margaret's idea, of course. She'd called Brad personally, her voice just a touch more fragile than usual. I've been feeling so confused lately, she'd said, injecting a tremor into her tone. I think I need to talk to the family about my future. About arrangements. She could practically hear Brad salivating over the phone. Of course, Mom. That's very responsible of you. We'll all come over Sunday. We can discuss everything then. Margaret spent Saturday preparing. She cooked Richard's favorite meal, herb-roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted Brussels sprouts, and her famous apple pie. She set the dining room table with the good china, the Waterford crystal, the sterling silver flatware they'd received as wedding presents 50 years ago. She put fresh flowers in every room. She polished the furniture until it gleamed. She wanted everything perfect. Charles Kensington had advised against this. Mrs. Whitmore, you don't owe them a performance. You can simply notify them by letter. Mr. Kensington, I've been looking forward to this moment for 2 weeks. I'm not missing it. Susan arrived Saturday night ostensibly to help with preparations, but really to make sure her mother was okay. She'd brought her girlfriend, Alice, a public defender with short purple hair and an impressive collection of tattoos. Mom, are you sure about this? Susan asked as they sat in the kitchen drinking tea at midnight. This is going to devastate Brad. Good, Margaret said crisply. He was planning to devastate me. But he's still your son. Susan, he was going to lock me in a nursing home and steal my money. Richard's money. Everything we built together. And he was going to do it with a smile on his face, telling himself he was doing the right thing. Margaret set down her teacup. Some things are unforgivable. Alice, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. In my line of work, I see a lot of family abuse. Elder abuse is epidemic and it's usually the children doing it. What your brother was planning, your mom's right. That's not forgivable. Susan took her mother's hand. I'm sorry I wasn't around more. You're here now, Margaret said. That's what matters. Sunday arrived with crystalline winter sunshine. Brad and Diane showed up at 4 p.m. sharp, their 2 teenage children in tow, Bradley Jr. and Ashley both glued to their phones. They were followed by Margaret's brother Tom and his wife Carol, who'd driven up from Florida. Margaret had called them too, filling them in on the situation. Tom had laughed so hard he'd cried. "Maggie, you're magnificent," he'd said. "I'll bring the popcorn." Margaret greeted everyone in the foyer, playing her role perfectly. A little vague, a little slower moving. Brad and Diane exchanged meaningful glances. "Mom, you look tired," Brad said, all concern. "Are you sure you're up for this?" "Oh, I'm fine, dear. Just excited to have everyone together." She patted his hand. "It's been too long." They gathered in the living room for cocktails first. Margaret served drinks with slightly shaking hands. Theater, all theater. While Brad hovered nearby, ready to catch her if she stumbled. "So, Mom," Brad said, settling onto the couch with his scotch, "you said you wanted to discuss your future?" "All in good time, dear. Let's have dinner first." The meal was spectacular if Margaret said so herself. Even Diane, who usually picked at food like a suspicious bird, had seconds of the chicken. Conversation flowed carefully around neutral topics. The weather, the kids' schools, Tom's golf game in Florida. Finally, as Margaret served pie and coffee, she stood at the head of the table and gently tapped her wine glass with a spoon. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I know some of you came from quite far away." She smiled at Tom and Carol, then at Susan and Alice. "Family is so important. Richard always said that family was everything." Brad was practically squirming in his seat, eager to get to the arrangements discussion. "I asked you here tonight because I've made some important decisions about my estate," Margaret continued. "At my age, one must be practical about such things." Diane elbowed Brad subtly. This was it. This was the moment she'd hand over control. "I've spent the last 2 weeks meeting with attorneys, financial advisors, and medical professionals. I wanted to ensure that everything was handled properly." Brad leaned forward. "Mom, that's very wise. We're here to support whatever decisions you've." "I'm leaving everything to the Greenwich Feline Rescue Society." The silence that fell over the dining room was so complete that Margaret could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway. "I'm sorry, what?" Brad's face had gone from anticipatory to confused. "The house, the stocks, the bonds, the rental properties, the bank accounts. All of it. $4.7 million, give or take, all going to the cat shelter." Margaret took a sip of her wine. "They're going to build a beautiful new facility. The Richard Whitmore Feline Care Center. Isn't that lovely?" Diane made a sound like a strangled cat herself. "Mom, you're joking." Brad's voice was strained. You're confused. You can't just." "Oh, I'm not confused at all, Bradley. In fact, I had a full psychiatric evaluation done by Dr. Elizabeth Chin at Yale. Scored in the 97th percentile for my age. She said I have exceptional mental acuity. Shall I get you a copy of the report? I had Charles Kensington make several extras." Brad's face went from confused to pale. "Charles Kensington? Mom, what have you done?" "I've done what I should have done years ago. I've put my affairs in order." Margaret was smiling now, really smiling. "Everything is signed, witnessed, notarized, and filed. It's completely legal and absolutely irrevocable." "This is insane." Diane erupted from her seat. "You can't give away our inheritance to a bunch of cats." "It's not your inheritance, Diane. It's my money. My house. My property. Mine to do with as I please." "But we're your family." Brad was on his feet now too. "We've taken care of you, supported you. Is that what you call it?" Margaret's voice turned cold. "Is that what you were doing when you called Dr. Patterson to have me declared mentally incompetent? When you were planning to lock me in Shady Pines and liquidate my assets?" Brad's face went white, then red. "How did you?" "I picked up the phone. Heard everything. The whole charming plan." Margaret looked around the table. Tom and Carol were watching with barely concealed glee. Susan had her phone out, recording. Bradley Jr. and Ashley had finally looked up from their phones, sensing drama. "You were going to warehouse me and steal my life's work. So I decided to do something Richard would have been proud of. Something that actually helps innocent creatures who can't help themselves." "Mom, please." Brad's voice cracked. "We can talk about this. If you heard something out of context." "Out of context?" Margaret laughed. "Bradley, you discussed the exact dollar amount of the estate. You complained about my house being a money pit. You joked about me taking up skydiving. Which part of that did I take out of context? Diane grabbed Brad's arm. Do something. There's nothing to do, Charles Kensington's voice came from the doorway. Margaret had invited him to arrive for dessert. Mrs. Whitmore's affairs are in perfect order. I've been practicing estate law for 40 years. This is the most legally airtight will I've ever drafted. Brad turned on Susan. You're okay with this? She's giving away your inheritance too. Susan shrugged. I told you last week I wouldn't help you commit elder abuse. You didn't listen. Mom can do whatever she wants with her money. And honestly, he grinned. This is the most badass thing I've ever seen. Elder abuse? Brad sputtered. We were trying to help her. By declaring her incompetent and seizing her assets? That's the textbook definition of elder abuse. Alice spoke up for the first time, her public defender voice calm and authoritative. You could actually face criminal charges for what you were planning. The room erupted. Diane was shrieking about lawyers. Brad was trying to talk to his mother, his tone shifting between pleading and angry. Tom was laughing openly now. Bradley Jr. muttered, "This is so messed up," and went back to his phone. Ashley asked if she could have more pie. Margaret remained calm, seated at the head of the table like a queen surveying her kingdom. I think it's time for everyone to leave, she said finally, her voice cutting through the chaos. Except you, Susan. And you, Tom and Carol. The rest of you are no longer welcome in my home. Mom, please. Brad tried one more time. Get out of my house, Bradley. Charles Kensington held the door open. Brad and Diane left, Diane still shrieking threats about lawyers. The teenagers followed, Bradley Jr. giving his grandmother a small, respectful nod on the way out. When the door closed behind them, the remaining group erupted in laughter. Maggie, that was beautiful, Tom said, wiping his eyes. Richard would have loved it. He would have, Margaret agreed. She felt lighter than she had in years. Free. Susan came around the table and hugged her mother. You're my hero. I'm just a woman who got tired of being underestimated. Epilogue. 6 months later. Margaret stood in the summer sunshine, watching as workers put the finishing touches on the sign, the Richard Whitmore Feline Care Center. The new building was beautiful, modern, spacious, with large windows and outdoor patios where the residents could safely enjoy fresh air. Inside, there was a state-of-the-art veterinary clinic, large adoption areas, and comfortable quarantine spaces for new rescues. David Summers stood beside her, still looking slightly dazed by his good fortune. We've already rescued 237 cats since the funding came through, he said. And we've hired 8 full-time staff. Margaret, this is changing everything. Good, Margaret said. She watched a little orange tabby playing in one of the patios. Richard would be so pleased. Brad had indeed hired lawyers. 3 different firms. All of them had reviewed the case and told him the same thing. There was nothing to be done. The will was ironclad, Margaret's mental competency was documented beyond any doubt, and his own plans for conservatorship, complete with Dr. Patterson's now abandoned evaluation paperwork, would not reflect well on him in court. Dr. Patterson's practice was facing some uncomfortable questions from the state medical board. Turned out Margaret had reported him for ethical violations. Nothing would likely come of it, but his reputation in Greenwich had taken a hit. Margaret had eventually sold the big house. Too many memories, too much space for one woman. She'd moved into a charming condo overlooking the Long Island Sound, with enough room for Susan to visit and for Margaret to finally get another cat. She'd named him Richard. He was a grumpy old Tom who'd been at the shelter for 3 years, overlooked because of his age and attitude. Margaret understood the feeling. He's perfect, she told David when she adopted him. Absolutely perfect. Now, standing in front of the center that would save thousands of cats, Margaret felt Richard's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. We did good, didn't we? She whispered. The wind rustled through the trees and somewhere inside the new center, a cat meowed. Sounded like agreement. Margaret smiled and walked toward the building. There was a grand opening ceremony to attend and she was the guest of honor. After all, she had all the time in the world. And thanks to her excellent cognitive function, she'd remember every moment of it. The